be interesting if the camera just like did this.
Look, can you hear it with the camera?
Yes.
So 14. Stacy, sorry about that. I just know.
No, I understand.
Stuff.
I know.
Thank you.
Where are those? So we do this 14.
Introduced to us at the Energy Committee as well.
Yeah.
We're good.
All right. I can bang my bottle. Call to order the meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Committee on what we believe today to be Tuesday, November 1st. Yeah, that's right. I knew that all day. I don't know why I forgot about that. I will be chairing today. I'm Christopher Zigmont, the vice chair. Chetna is away. First item is going to be public comments. So we're opening the floor for public comments, but I don't know if the public knows that we're not in our main room. Do we have any public comments today? Anything to offer?
Yeah, looking forward to the possibility of this moving forward to the select board meetings, the plastics initiative, and to see if that can move forward through our town. I would love to see that happen. So that is the public comment.
It is the public comment. If there are no other public
So, excuse me, for the record, can you just say your name and address for the stenographer?
Of course, yeah. I apologize. My name is Ryan Jean. I do live in Exeter, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Our next item after that will be to approve the minutes from October, which were circulated around a few days back. Were there any comments or questions or issues with the minutes from anyone?
None. Move to approve.
I get a second on that?
Second.
The minutes are approved. Put that aside. Our next item is action items, which is interesting because I almost wonder if the way the agenda was written, if number 5 should have been a sub-item to 4, but but what I will do before we get into the single-use plastics discussion about the ordinance stuff, I will bring up just the one other item that is an action item that we will be supporting pumpkin composting this Sunday in cooperation with...
Hi, is this the supervisors of the checklist committee?
Nope, they're upstairs.
Thank you so much.
I believe they're finished, but go ahead and chat. Yeah.
Pumpkin composting at Laney and Lou. They're going to support us on November 6th, 9 to 11, and help with the Girl Scouts. Local Girl Scout troop is going to be there helping as well, and we'll do our best to, we're going to train up our Girl Scouts in the morning before we get started on why it's so important to keep pumpkins out of the landfill, which contribute an awful lot of methane every year, and it's a much better use while composting. If uncontrolled, can contribute methane. A proper composting outfit like Mr. Fox does a brilliant job of managing that and turning that biomass into something useful like good soil for next year's planting. So that is November 6th, 9 to 11. And for those listening or watching at home or reading these minutes later, that's open to all Exeter residents to come down and bring their pumpkins, and I understand that Laney and Lou's will have free coffee, so that's reason enough to even take your neighbor's pumpkin down there. So that's that. From that, we should move to the single-use plastics document. Chris Murphy is here, and she's been working diligently on the town side to work through language on an effort to get an ordinance placed on the warrant article this year. So the steps we're going through to do that, and in addition to that, working on some presentation materials. So I will pass the baton over to you to give us an update as to where we are.
Great, so after the last meeting, I had drafted some slides in support of our presentation to the select board. Chris and Stacy graciously agreed to help form a subcommittee with me to develop a presentation. So we met virtually last week. Correct me. Yeah. It feels very long time ago, but we met virtually last week. And so you received from Chetna a copy of the slides plus an outline of what we were going to talk about so that you'd have a gist of the presentation. And I think our goal tonight is to simply hear if you feel like other points need to be emphasized, if there's, if we're good this way, if there's some tweaks that you'd like to see in the presentation. But we'd like predominantly to focus our discussion tonight on the frequently asked questions. And so what I put there was, and that's, that was the second to the last slide, I believe. I can find it.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't see it on.
So, I will list them and we can talk through, so I had done these in PowerPoint and then I tried to convert them to Google Slides and I missed one. But, so the frequently asked questions, the ones that I heard, these were based generally on the comments that people made. So there were 2 surveys, just as a reminder, that we sent out, one to staff, one to those who received permits through the town from 2019 through, I think it was June 2022, June of this year. And so we sent a survey out to them, and through that process, the survey had an option to provide additional comments, questions about the ordinance, recommendations. And so I'll just step through based on each survey because I don't have it organized in a slide format. But from staff, the most common theme, I would say, in the comments was confusion. There was confusion about how this policy would apply to town staff and town departments. And so there were concerns expressed about, for example, if we need to buy bags of salt to salt, the sidewalks, and they're not available in something other than a plastic bag, where we do. And so, my interpretation, and we discussed this, I think, at the last meeting, was this is mainly to focus on distribution of single-use plastics. This is not a purchasing policy that the town is adopting that would refine the products that we purchase or define, suppliers or anything like that. So there were a bunch of comments like, Amazon packaging and some other stuff. So I think we can address that this is relevant to distribution of single-use plastics. The second most common question was, if I go to grab some takeout at a local business and bring it back to the office, or I bring something from home and it's in my own container, how would this policy apply? My answer is it wouldn't. And so I think just offering up some general concepts of areas in town that I think this would apply would be helpful in that slide for staff. So offering examples like the water bottles that we have upstairs and the plastic cups so that people during meetings can get a drink. It would change how we would supply the plastic cups. And so that was the staff side. There was some other comments wanting to have additional meetings, which we've since done, so I'll save that for later if we want to talk about the next steps. And then and there was a comment that I thought was very interesting from staff, because it was something that also came through in the permittees, and it was, why do we need a policy? Like, we're a small enough group, can't we just all sit around and agree to come up with a solution? And, meet with departments and talk about what they use, and then we'll work better. Which, I totally understand that. I think that in terms of policy, it's helpful to have some sort of commitment that we can apply uniformly on town property. And so from my perspective, though I agree with that, and I think that would be great, it's just easier if it's a defined, we go through a process, we've done our outreach, and we have a clear policy. But, and if we were to do it that method, I think our approach would be very different from how we initiated this process. So, from the permittees, the questions were things like, could we consider, if we brought like the 2.5 gallon Poland Springs jugs to an event, is that considered a single-use plastic? And so I think that is something that we should address in our policy. I'd be happy to hear your response. My feeling is because a lot of those jugs are not recyclable, they're kind of, I forget what number they are, but they're like the milky plastic and aren't recyclable. I would discourage that, but I would encourage something like an igloo cooler, that you're going to use multiple times, maybe not a styrofoam, but anyway, an igloo cooler or something, a larger cooler that you could use for multiple events. It's not just buying it for one event and then you're done with it. So there was another comment too that was commonly made. Could this policy be set up with a threshold? So it would only apply to those using, like maybe it's okay for us to have a case of water for an event, but anything more than that, we'd need, we need to find an alternative product. And so that's another item that I think we can address from frequently asked questions. So beyond those, I guess I'd just open it up to you guys. Like, what are there things that you've been hearing from members of the public, or thoughts that you've had for how to apply it, or trips we might stumble on as we're going through this process that we want to?
Yeah, I think certainly, because it's going to be presented at the select board in a public meeting, maybe one of the first FAQs will be to, and hopefully, and let me preface it with, I think the slide deck is great, and it will probably answer a lot of questions as we go along, and there's nothing better than getting to an FAQ page where you go, yep, and remember on slide 7. So hopefully we're successful in that. But, it's becoming old hat to us. We've been looking at the slide deck for a while, so it's easy to assume. Probably one of the hot ones will simply be take an extra minute to define this ordinance as being for the town and town property and town departments versus a town-wide ordinance through retailers and other things. I think that will. I think when people hear the word ordinance, the assumption is it's, dog licenses and everything else, right? So that would be one. One of the things, again, I think we talk about it in the deck, and it's in the language of the draft, but the transition period. I think we want to highlight the fact that, this is not, we'd like to build in a transition period to help people get up to speed. I know we spoke a little bit about it in a couple of our subcommittee meetings as well, but that the intent is to make this, make sure that this is seen as an opportunity, and town departments and sustainability committee and others will be working to help solve the problems, to help find solutions, because certainly I think a lot of the concern and fear is that I don't know what to do, I don't know what to buy, I don't know what else we can use, right? So we spoke about working on a list and a living document of alternatives. So. One of the things are, can you imagine your neighbor asking you?
It was brought up about public water supply sources. So, all of these places that we have meeting spaces Swayze Parkway is a good one, don't necessarily have a source of public water supply. And so there was concern about adopting policy without that in place. I will say, I was going to share this later, but I will say that I spoke with Matt Garvey at the Water and Sewer Department. He says capacity-wise, there's an existing spigot at the Park Street walkway at Swayze. And so logistically or capacity-wise, we could theoretically connect to that and install a water fountain in Swayze. But it's the trustees ultimately that decide what happens in the parkway. So I am on the agenda for the 17th the 16th to speak with the trustees. So I have a list of potential grant sources, and I've been trying to work with Greg Bison to find out costs, how much water usage we need to budget for annually, and how much will it cost to install, not just purchase the water fountain, but also, trench and connect and all of that stuff. So I hope to have all of that tied together by the time we meet on the 16th.
Yeah, interestingly, we did have a subcommittee meeting with Greg about this topic, and if you've trotted around town, you've been over to, I keep calling it Dinosaur Park, Kids Park, children's kids playground. You'll see there's actually a new water station there, but just supply chain difficulties have prevented a couple of key small parts from getting in time, so they're not connected yet. He's hopeful that, I think they got to the point where they were almost ready to do it, but now it's time to shut the water off anyway, so they're going to schedule that in the spring. But it's just one of those things where, even with the best intentions, trying to get this stuff done, given the pandemic, supply chain, stuff like that. And I don't know the answer to this. Has there ever been a water fountain in Swayze Park, ever, anywhere? Or never?
I don't believe there has, but yeah. I know downtown in this little park here, there used to be a water fountain there that was capped, and Gilman is the other one that I know of. But beyond that, I don't know of.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look back across our lifetimes, they've kind of come in and out of favor and fashion for public health reasons and things like that. I think that water bottle filling concept that has come around the last 5-10 years has really kind of reopened, helping people reimagine things, and also just the understanding of single-use plastic. So hopefully that'll have an impact. One of the other big topics, just so you guys know, to report on some subcommittee discussion we had. I know you had some discussions with Teen, and we finally were able to catch up with Parks and Rec. Like it or not, people show up and especially kids at the pool or sporting events, they forget bottles, right? And so I think Greg said they end up selling or giving out somewhere around the number of 1,500 bottles of plastic water a year. So, and it's important to have, right? So we talked about some different solutions for that. We started some side conversations about, one of the things that's trending right now are cans of water, aluminum cans of water, because the aluminum cans are 100% recyclable. And we started at our zip code and started working out from there. We've had a discussion with Sawville already. They're a canner. It turns out they can only do carbonated water, but they're helping us find some other people in the region to do that. Love to work with a local supplier who'd like to partner with us as a town. Rather give somebody local some money to do that, to can some water for us. So that's something we're looking at, and hopefully we'll have some success, if not in town, in the region. But I point to that only in that's just one of dozens of challenges we're going to come across. There's going to be obstacles. People are going to have supply chain issues or not be aware of what alternatives are available. So I think as long as we just keep an open mind and just try to, just find a solution. And if we find ourselves painted into a corner that there isn't a solution at the time, then we'll have to run with it. But I think there's enough imagination out there. This is being done elsewhere, not only across the country, but right up the road. So I think there's ways to work around it. So.
Yeah, I will say that the canning of water is an excellent idea. I honestly wouldn't have even really thought about that. And even like in a long-term storage scenario, leachings of plastic in hot weather and terrible storage conditions, that kind of thing. You know, would, for just health reasons, aluminum is a better storage solution there. And in terms of like budgeting for trenching and stuff, I would even consider reaching out to like local contractors and stuff. There are a lot of companies in the area that do have kind of volunteer hours kind of allocated to their employees. I know myself at my company, we allocate 4 to 6 hours of paid time for volunteer hours for our employees. People that have experience in digging trenches, running conduits, etc. So it might be something that you might be able to find a local contractor that might be willing to partner with you as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah, winterizing.
That's actually a good idea. I'm also the select board rep for the Swayze Park trustees.
Oh, okay.
They, on Arbor Day, they had identified, it's close to like $20,000 worth of tree work that, you know, they were gonna put out to bid, and there were 4 separate tree companies that how they celebrate Arbor Day is to do pro bono work. So the price of, the town fed the employees breakfast and lunch, and they did $20,000 worth of tree work. It's
Really?
So
No-brainer.
Yeah.
you know, but that's worth looking into if there are.
Definitely.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's good. Good suggestion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are lots of people in our area that own mini excavators and such, so wouldn't be surprised if there was someone that would be willing to do that.
Of course, there are some insurances, like we have to do some legwork, but it's
We just can't just drive over in our tractors.
There's always things.
What other things can we imagine? Or I guess what I'd say is, we have 13 days till we have to present this. So as FAQs or ideas for FAQs come to mind, forward those to Kristen, and we'll get those added to the presentation. And I think the 3 of us on the subcommittee for the presentation will work to just kind of work on the presenting of it and just dial in the slides. But I think it feels pretty good. It looks like 95% there. So.
So Russ's office will need whatever you want in the packet, like by ideally Thursday afternoon, but Friday morning.
So Nico, I was not initially thinking to include the slides in the packet, because your packets are so big.
I would encourage you to do so,
Should I? Okay.
because
Right.
a lot of folks will go on that follow town business. A lot of folks will go on the weekend and look at the packet.
Would, PowerPoint, for example, has an output that's, smaller capture of the slide and some text, and just to condense it down, would that be appropriate, or do you need full-blown slides in?
I mean, I think for folks to read online, it might be better to just do the full-blown slides.
Okay, great.
And I know it's easier for us to read.
So if that's the case, if you have additional FAQs that you want to be sure get included, ideally if I could have that by the 9th.
Okay.
And you said the packets go out.
Yeah, Russ and I usually meet on the Thursday, and I know he and
Okay.
Pam try to start Thursday. I mean, they work on it Friday, but it gets posted Friday afternoon, but
Okay.
obviously the sooner.
Yeah, or even the 8th. I mean, that's a week from now, so that's Tuesday. If you could provide anything, that would be great. Another one that I heard was, well, if I take this plastic water bottle and recycle it, like that's 2 uses, right? And so I know we talked in the presentation about why we can't kind of recycle our way out of this issue, but I think something like that in the FAQ might be helpful to have.
Yeah, I agree. And a couple of slides we've added in there were just sort of some of the higher level looks at just the sheer volume of plastic that's coming out. How, just the current situation in our town for recycling only addresses 3 of the 7 of them. That even those 3 that get collected, 91% of that plastic never even gets recycled into anything, right? So hopefully we can, but you're right, I think we should address that. The objective is the elimination of the plastic, not necessarily ramping up recycling. It gets back to your earlier comment that we can't recycle our way out of this because it's just not happening.
It was really interesting, it was either Sunday or yesterday, but in the Boston Globe, there was an article about that most of the plastic that gets put into recycling, nothing happens.
Yeah, the market for it is just non-existent right now, so.
And even that plastic that is recycled often gets downcycled into a product that you then can't recycle, so.
Yeah, if you think about things like aluminum and magnesium that can, be repurposed in almost the same value, industrial value, most plastics can't, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if all of you have been to like a large recycling facility, but they have, people on conveyor belt, chucking, and, if there's contaminants in the actual like sorted plastics, then that entire batch is then discarded because essentially they cannot prove that this is a 100% pure.
Right.
So that is a constant thing. So it's amazing. Yeah.
And along that line, so another question that folks asked the permittees was, could the town provide recycling facilities during town events? And I talked to Jay Perkins, and he said he could have the crew do that, but there would need to be a commitment from the permittee to station someone basically there to ensure that what goes in the recycle bin is in fact recyclable. Otherwise, for that reason, otherwise they won't take it. So
I'm just looking at this policy while we're running through it again, and I think we wanted to strike out the penalty provision.
yes.
But I think the penalties and remedies section still says a written warning that includes the potential penalties for future violations will be issued. So I think we just need to strike, if the town determines a violation of this ordinance has occurred, the town will issue a written warning. And just strike that includes the potential penalties for future violations. I mean, I guess what I'm also...
Can you say that again?
Oh, yeah, so in 20...
Oh, I see it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, in section 2405, subsection 1.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess what I'm wondering, you're asking about... I thought we had discussed at one point that the distribution was going to somehow be defined as some sort of sale. Because, I mean, this initially started out as vendors on Swayze Park. And I guess what I'm wondering is, not to backtrack, although I am.
Better to do it now.
But our goal wasn't
But it's-
just for sale, right?
Yeah, so that's, okay, I mean, if that's, I just want to be clear, because that was, that kind of raised, I was looking through it for that line of questioning about distribution versus, what does it mean to distribute? So if this policy was aimed to be at dealing with vendors, then distribution should be defined as the sale of a product. But if it's distribution also at a town facility just for its employees or for visitors,
Yeah.
then I think we just want to make sure that, that that's clear in the FAQs, that distribution doesn't only include the sale of, it's, the distribution is widely distributed or given out in any form to...
So we just want to have a definition for distribution?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, that's just that might help eliminate some confusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's fine in 2402. It says no person shall distribute prohibited single use at any town facility. But then I think it gets a little bit confusing. What if the town can issue a warning to itself? I mean, I guess that's what I was, but I don't think that's,
So you mean more for what's the internal recourse if,
I mean, the town's going to abide by its own rules. So, I mean, it's probably fine. I was just thinking of trying to find a way to eliminate that confusion from that question that you had asked, Kristen.
It's a good devil's advocate process, for sure.
yeah, I mean, it would not harm us to have a definition for distribution in the definitions section.
Yeah, okay.
All right, anything else we want to add before we move on? So just, any additional comments? or I think
Just the only other point, if it comes up with a question, on why are we doing this, recycling plastics is just as good. I mean, I think the point to make there is, we're also burning fossil fuels and using energy to not only create them, but also to recycle them. While it uses less energy to recycle them, we're still using, fossil fuels essentially to power the making and recycling. So why are we doing that when there's other methods out there?
Agreed.
Just as a rebuttal if that question was raised.
And by just completely avoiding the need.
Exactly.
So the other thing to remember too is that because there's 3 public hearings, I mean, more than likely at the first one, somebody on the board may bring something up, or they might add something, they might want you to revise it, or they might have a question. So like what you're bringing on the 14th can be changed to bring back to the next hearing. Right. Somebody from the public may have something. So just be aware that, what you're sending in on the 14th and presenting, with the tree ordinance comes to mind. We changed that, I think, we added, or just, not add, but revised language to make it clearer. So, I mean,
Sure.
These things, it's kind of a working process, at least within the first 2 hearings anyway.
And I think there's always something that, I mean, we've been through this, we are very close to it, we've been through it a number of times, but there's always something that you just kind of miss.
Sure.
So in general, just talking about the steps forward, it's 3 public hearings, so ideally, we'll present slides on the first public hearing. I suspect we wouldn't need to do the slides, or would do an abbreviated version at the second public hearing. And then by the third public hearing, hopefully all of the language has been ironed out, there's no additional changes, and it's either approved or not approved.
Correct.
So.
And I think we added, pursuant to the comments, I think we exempted, Meals on Wheels.
Yep.
So if there are concerns about that,
Public safety.
we've addressed those. We listened to the concerns from the community. We took them seriously and addressed them.
Yeah. That was certainly our intention. And I think the last meeting that we had when we discussed this as a committee, it was really insightful to hear your commitment to helping shepherd our town through this, not just by adopting this policy, but like coming up with the list of products and working through, solutions, not just adoption of a policy. And so I think, to me, that was really helpful to hear. And I think that it'll be very important that the public hears that too.
Great. I hope so too.
And I'm happy to, and I will bring up, at least during the first hearing, that, this has come a long way. I mean, you as a committee, you've been talking about this for some time now. And to Kristen's point, it started out with, let's do this ordinance. And I'm going back even last year, I think. And I mean, you really put the time and the effort into, not only come up with an ordinance, but to do your homework and come up with solutions. It's not just like, here you go. And I think that having witnessed the work that you've done, at least at the, nights that we have the meetings, I mean, this is ready for prime time. So,
Yeah, it'd be good. I'm excited because we'll see how it goes, and hopefully, other than catching some things we missed or whatever, hopefully it'll steam along and people support the idea. So that's the hope.
And we have a good response to the question as to why this isn't being adopted town-wide.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and just so that we're clear, we've talked about it before, but New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire has to grant municipalities the authority to do something like that. And that has not happened. But because it's town property, the town can regulate what they do on town property. And so, until which time the state grants us that authority, we could not implement this townwide.
Yep, well, right.
Maybe we could talk more about that.
No, that's
Because I'd
okay.
be
No, that's all
interested
right.
in your
Just as the
perspective, but
lawyer in me
that's my
is saying that the way that it's phrased right now is ambiguous, and I would love to challenge the way that it's currently phrased, that it gives us the authority to go. But I think that, as we've heard from counsel for Portsmouth, and probably our town council has advised us to keep it only to town-owned property to avoid potential litigation at a cost to the town. So I think that's...
And we did
Just
do
kind of-
that step.
Yeah.
We did check with legal counsel. It was a while ago, yes, we did.
And further success, right? I mean, like, realistically, if, if you want something to be successful, then limiting the actual impact on people that don't want it is probably the best way. And in this case, you have a town that would be willing to make these changes in their facilities and for the events that are held. And likely there are private citizens that would not be supportive of that. To be successful and to make an impact, you really have to choose that value.
You've got to start somewhere.
This is a big step forward.
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
big step
This is
forward.
a great step forward, definitely.
Yeah, and it'll be if we're successful and it passes, then it'd be an excellent example. And it would,
Stepping stone.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
exactly.
And not to rehash last meeting, but Adam, I think it was you who said this, during COVID, first of all, Exeter has repeatedly stepped up for conservation, for sustainability. And you had mentioned during COVID how, it's okay, I'm going to tip extra because I want to support these businesses. And I think that we have learned the value of supporting our local businesses
Exactly,
through
yeah.
COVID, and I think Exeter residents will step up and pay added costs, even if that's what vendors are required to do in order to have a better product out there.
I fully agree.
Fantastic. I agree. All right. So just a reminder to get things to Kristen for any changes or comments or updates, FAQs, whatever, by Thursday at the latest. Sooner is better. So we can get that in. Next item is an update on the subcommittee. So if you'll remember, we asked a couple subcommittees one was to go out and revise the charge language and update that as we kind of rolled through some milestones of the initial charge. The other one was to work on some of the projects for the coming year and some things to tackle. Adam and I took that on, and if you remember last month in October, we presented an outline of some things and took your feedback and came back, and we've resubmitted essentially 3 projects to work on. That's in your packet. It's in the packet online as well. Number 1 is just some revised language on a sustainability checklist. So using a simple punch list to begin to work with town departments and committees and boards on as we start to look at new projects. Hey, have we looked at this? Have we looked at this? Have we looked at this? And more is just really just that checklist to help guide things through. I think the feeling is that, we've got a great planning team here in town who are already very mindful of many of these things. And so I think the objective is that enthusiasm for the meat of projects often you will forget about some things. So it's just the idea that it'll help guide people coming into projects, especially before they even bring them to the town, and say, oh yeah, we need to make sure we're looking at energy. We need to make sure we're looking at water usage and runoff mitigation and all these sorts of things. And it's a very high level pass. So just some basic guidelines to help with that. So that's project number one. Number two, we looked at working on, again, these are projects, all right? These are things to knock down for this year. So these are outlines. Water and access. So in addition to the single-use plastic ban and aid the transition, one of the things that we talked about a little earlier tonight was to continue to work with the town to find ways to solve access to potable water around town, right? And I think it's a never-ending project, right? It's be one of those things that we just need to continue to improve and work to make more access. I love that. Word on the street is there's grants out there for this kind of stuff. I love the idea of working with local commercial partners that have volunteer hours. And just, it's great to think of a town 5 years from now having places to fill up your bottle all around town. It's just a habit. It's just what you do. So that'll be great. Part of that also was, tying that into working with actionable items and recommendations for water conservation. Those are kind of, in our mind, hand in glove with that. You can't just avail more water and not work on conservation at the same time. So if this spins off into a project group, it's both access and conservation as it moves forward. And then number three kind of works a little bit with number one in a certain sense, but it really kind of lays the gauntlet down to help look at things like building code revision. If we're looking at sustainable drought situations, right? Sea level rise. We have an estuary and river right here in our backyard. There's going to be things we're going to need to look at. So what can we do the homework on and propose to help? Especially working with the Energy Committee, but to review building code, to assess even permitting use of fossil fuel or carbon energy in future building projects. What about things like rainwater recapture, allowing cisterns in town, things along those lines. So definitely a farther reaching project, and again, another ongoing project that will take, really be fodder for this committee to do some work for a long time. But I think we're starting to see in more drought-stricken communities out west, these building codes are getting revised quickly because they need to look at this. California's done a brilliant job with their energy stuff on their statewide building code. So we'd like to bring that forward and again make this a working project group and see what we can do to help do that. I don't know what the appetite is at the municipal level to have dramatically different codes than the state codes, and obviously there's a growth and development side to that as well. If the town becomes too restrictive and things like that, then that could have a whiplash effect to what we want. But then it gets back into that growth for growth's sake discussion, and do you do it at all costs? And of course we don't. So finding that middle ground and making some progress. So those are the three basic project areas that we came up with. What I like about all three of them and what we thought would be nice to put together was that there's stuff to be done on all three of those kind of right away, but they also have a lot of legs that there'll be continued work to do. So we've attached that, and hopefully by next meeting with Chetna here, we can get some working groups put together to work on that. Any questions on those projects?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on point three. We were talking, and it seemed to us that there's a lot that could be done with. I see large apartment buildings being built, across town. It's a question for the town as a whole. Are those buildings being built in the most sustainable way? When you have, hundreds of new apartment buildings coming in, how are we going to operate as a community to make sure that that's sustainable? We're going to be having a lot more people moving into town because of those condos. Do we have the water structure? I mean, the energy infrastructure is there, I think, to have solar panels on those roofs. Is that something that we look at as a town and say, okay, if you're building, an apartment complex with more than 3 or 4 condos in it, then you've got to have some sort of energy efficiency. The other thing that I was thinking about was with regards to flooding and sea level rise. Are the buildings around the river here, are those up to code for, if there's a big flooding event? I know that there are engineers, I was just at a conference a couple weeks ago that were talking about the engineering practices and how they've becoming they're updating their engineering codes to take into account the potential for sea level rise and water rise and larger floods. And this isn't just, for sustainability, but it's also at the same time, I think, for public safety. So if you are constructing a new building on the Exeter River, we should be making sure that, new homes are going to be able to potentially survive that, 100-year flood that is now really every 10 years.
Yeah.
So it just seems to me that would be worth our time at a town level to see what we could do.
I'd be curious to see, if you look at the 2018 master plan, that was obviously, quite a bit of work went into that. There's some really interesting maps on sea level rise over time and things like that. I'd be curious to see, those documents are already, 4.5 years old, to see what updates that look like now. And, just knowing, just because process takes time to look at what the latest documentation is that would support work here. So, any other questions on or comments on the project list?
I do have a couple comments on item 3. So there is currently an opportunity to apply. So I met with Doug when this got brought up as a potential item for priority. I met with Doug Eastman, who's our code enforcement officer, just to kind of understand, and our building inspector, to understand, Exeter follows the 2015 building codes, and they're updated every 3 years. So we're kind of behind only because of what the state has adopted. And so I talked to him, what would that process look like? And it sounds complicated. And so I was like, well, that sounds like a consultant, we need some outside help with this sort of thing. And I was able to find a grant, and I think it was for the Building Resilient Infrastructure bill, that a grant to evaluate building codes and your energy codes and identify areas where efficiencies can be adopted. And so maybe this subcommittee, when it gets formed, that could be like our first step to, evaluate the potential for applying for a grant, and moving forward that way. It did sound very, very complicated, though, I will say.
One of the things that brings a smile to my face, what I love about you is that immediately, so I went to go see what grants are available, and you're like awesome at that. So
it's hard not to
love
eat it and read it and live it every day, but because, we're level funded.
No, it's great. It's brilliant.
And then I will say, well, I'll give you an update about sea level rise, maybe at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I will say that through my job personally, I'm a technical specialist with Revision Energy, and I'm directly tied in. It's actually completely my job to be responsible for the code compliancy of our systems and how they interact with homes, and work with structural engineers on a regular basis. And New Hampshire did adopt the 2018 building code, but that will not be enforced until January. But once January happens, from then on, 2018 international IRC and IBC will be enforced in New Hampshire. That does come with structural and other code requirements that have been updated from the 2015.
It's interesting, and so I'm asking because I don't know. So that so that we're going to move forward in 2023 all the way up to the 2018 building codes. Is there ever a time that one would ever catch up? Is it possible that it's always a lag, and as those codes get developed and published, then there's always this lag by the time they get deployed at street level?
Yeah, so it's actually on a per state basis that these codes are adopted, and they're actually not federally written codes. The codes are actually written by a private company, and those codes are then adopted by the state. It's the same same with the National Electric Code. Those are not written by policymakers. They are created by people in the industry, and then those are adopted by the states. For, just for example, on a per state basis, the kind of the further south you go, the adoption of code cycles is less and less. So there are actually states that are still working on, 2014 and below in many states in the United States. So New Hampshire adopting the 2018 IBC with amendments that bring in codes from more recent code cycles is actually pretty substantial. We're not as caught up as, let's say, Massachusetts, but in terms of code adoption, it's actually kind of right on track for where New Hampshire typically falls.
Okay, fantastic. That's good to know. I did not know that.
And unlike the single-use plastics discussion, Doug had said that municipalities do have building code authority, so we do have the capability of adopting more stringent building codes than what the state requires. So,
100%.
So, knowing that there is that lag, and there's been some incredible, according to Doug, some incredible additions to the latest building codes. I think it would be really worth us exploring what components of that make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially in the terms of specifically, windows, insulation, stuff like that, requirements, the requirements actually pair really well with the new IRA bill as well. So people actually have direct tax benefit by
to go meet the code.
To go meet the code. Great. Yeah,
that's great.
Would pair really well if that was something that it was made to happen.
Wow, fantastic. That's really good to hear. Any other comments before we close out the project list? Okay. Next meeting we'll work with Chetna to come up with some subs for that to tackle those things. Next item is other business, and smartly, see how I've sort of conveniently bookended this, it's the pumpkin composting again. You see how I've done that? So just a reminder about that. We'll also work to push that out on social media one more time as a reminder for folks as it's timely. But I do want to come back to you. You had a couple of additional things we want to cover.
I do. So I'm starting, I think I did it at the last meeting, and I want to make this a habit just to kind of update this committee with what other committees are doing, and I'm doing the same thing with those committees. But I had mentioned this Swayze Trustees Committee meeting on November 16th. Community power aggregation, we now have, I created a graphic on the town's website to walk through the timeline for implementation, and so we're getting a lot of people contacting us saying, rates are so high, when's it gonna, where are we? And so there is a graphic on the website. I worked with a member of the Energy Committee to update the rebates page on the Energy Committee's website. Members from the Energy Committee are working with Public Works to restore the solar array dashboard. It used to be up and running, but, and I think it was when the town took it over or when, I don't know. But anyway, the dashboard was disabled and they're working to get that up and running again. There is this, and it's kind of late notice, but this weekend is the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commission's annual meeting. And they do have a climate track. I think the registration is $70, but the climate track has three different topics. One of them is kind of an overview of what climate change will mean to New Hampshire's climate, what shifts in tree, species composition, and all that sort of thing. Conservation strategies with climate change in mind, and then messaging to encourage change, messaging around climate change to encourage implementation of change. I don't think that we have anyone on Conservation Commission or SAC attending that track, but we do have some funds in the Conservation Commission budget for education and training, and I think they would be supportive if someone was interested in attending. It's in Pembroke, and I think it's all day. It's 8 to 3, I think.
Would you do us a favor and just blast us an email with that
Yep.
info?
Yep.
And then we can coordinate somebody to go if we can get somebody up there.
Yep.
That'd be very interesting.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention was related to sea level rise. So I have been working with Rockingham Planning Commission. They offered technical assistance to review our floodplain development ordinance. And we have a draft that we're discussing on Thursday, but basically it's to incorporate the 2-foot above freeboard requirement for new construction or substantial improvements. And so when there's 2 foot of freeboard above base flood elevation. So within the floodplain, if base flood elevation is, 33 feet, normally we're at 1 foot. We require 1 foot of freeboard, so you have to be 1 foot above that for the lowest level of your home or where equipment is. We're upping that to 2 foot of freeboard, which is pretty standard regionally. The other part of it is we're incorporating an advisory flood risk area. And so what that does is it looks at the model that has been prepared for our region for sea level rise and encourages people who are doing new construction or substantial improvement in that area. We advise them to follow the more restrictive floodplain regulations. And so I have a draft of that and I'm happy to send it around. This would be a town ordinance, so instead of being adopted by the select board, it would ultimately go to town meeting in March, and that's our goal. We're on a very tight time frame, but I would love to be able to share that with you and get some comments back and seek some support, to friends and family at the polls and move that forward. The cool part about that is we'll need to do some outreach and education around the zoning amendment, which meets our master plan goals and also helps move us toward improved resilience in terms of sea level rise.
Very, very super interesting. Yes, please share that along, which actually leads to a note that I made just after our meeting the other day, and I actually wanted to drag Nico into it because I don't know what's appropriate or not. It occurs to me that there's an opportunity to have Conservation Commission, Energy Commission, Energy Committee, and Conservation Committee, and this committee once a quarter, once every half year, once a year, get together and look at all the things that they're working on and share and swap ideas. Is that permitted, not permitted?
I would encourage you to do that as long as it's posted.
Okay.
We need to be posted like a regular meeting.
Sure.
And then you work out, between the chairs how you run it.
Right.
I would encourage that. I would also encourage reaching out and maybe not for every meeting, but have maybe somebody from sustainability go to an energy committee meeting.
Just
quarterly. Maybe,
sure, yeah.
And vice versa. And then also with Concom. Back 4 years ago with the facilities committee, I was the select board rep at the time. I know that Amy Farnham from Energy used to come in once, twice a year just to kind of touch base with them. Okay, that's perfect.
So as long as we go by the regular rules of having, great, because I think it'd just be super helpful, even if it only happened once every 6
You
months.
just have to post it like a regular meeting agenda. It has to be open,
Great.
public, and yeah, I would encourage that.
Great. We'll press forward with that.
And fortunately, staff like Kristen and you're involved with Concom in this one, and then I'm sure you overlap with Dave.
Hey, Energy. Yeah, you're all three.
Oh, yeah, he gave that up to you too?
Yeah, well, Dave is doing the solar array,
Okay.
but yeah.
So that is helpful. that
Yeah,
you get staff.
absolutely.
Kristen is the staff for all three, so.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
great idea.
All right, great. Well, we'll get that implemented. Fantastic. Any other business? Any other topics? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have to get a motion to adjourn? I think I do.
So moved.
You got a second?
Second.
This meeting is adjourned. At whatever it is right
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.